Hare Krishna, and welcome to class number 2
Hare Krishna.
of the Light of the Bhagavata. We'll be looking at verses 13 through 24, the second quarter, Light of the Bhagavat, and we'll start with some kirtan.
Okay. A lot of energy all of a sudden. So come into your comfortable seat. Just got your one. Take a deep breath in through your nose, fill up. Open your mouth, exhale, let it go. Let's do that one more time. Inhale through your nose, fill up. Open your mouth, exhale, let it go. Give our opening prayers. Inhale. Om Jnana Samarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Panchakopatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyacha Titanam Bhavadebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Bhagavana ki. Harinam Sankirtan ki. Shri Shri Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki. Shri Shri Gaurnitai ki. Bhakti House Sangha and beyond ki. Shastra Study Group ki. Haribol.
Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gaur Premanande, Hare Bo. Hare Krishna. So welcome back, everybody. We had our first class on Laila Bhagavat last week, and it's a very different book as we experienced. It's very Srila Prabhupada. He chose that chapter to well, we can we'll have to kind of postulate. We have to kind of guess because he left a manuscript and we found it after he left the planet. But it was a chapter from the Bhagavatam about nature, in which the Bhagavatam describes deep spiritual wisdom, but through analogies with really relatable things. We talked about the power of analogies. We talked about the relatability of seeing Krishna in the natural world. And we talked about the different themes in those first 12 verses. So like gratitude was a big one. Amy, I appreciated your comments about I don't know if it was you or maybe someone else, but in the morning, just like the frogs they come to life after the water falls, they start croaking. So the brahmacharis, the monks, they wake up early and they start their chanting of mantras. That was I don't know who that was. That was Leanne. Yeah. And a lot of feedback. So let's have some reflections on any of those reflections from the first, yes. Reflections on reflections from the first 12 verses. Anything that stood out that you thought was interesting that you can remember now? Yes.
So I think what stood out to me, and I've just spent the past 3 decades in nature. I love nature. And the thing that stood out to me most was verse 12 about the strength of the mountain. And when I think about all the things I've experienced in nature and all the things in nature, to me, the mountain's like the most fixed thing, never changing, no matter what it's given. And it just has a strength. And I think of all the ways that we have to be strong in the world today, mentally, physically, spiritually. So thinking, of standing tall like a mountain really struck me. And then I happen to have just heard Wisdom of the Sages. I don't know why it came up in the rotation, Achuta Gopi, her interview. And she said at the end, that being spiritual was the most brave thing anyone can do. And the entire world wants us to do something different every moment, everywhere. We're always getting pulled to do something. And it's very brave to go internal with God in our hearts. And the most courageous thing we can do is to stay spiritual in a material functioning world. And so like all I could think of is the strength of the mountain and how hard that is. But then it also linked into me for verse 10 about the torrents of rain striking the mountain, and then just the beauty of the imagery about all this transcendental knowledge downpouring over us, and how I feel after coming to a class, or just how much better I felt just coming upstairs and walking through the door. So it just felt like a downpour already.
Beautiful.
So I love this is such a beautiful book, and it's so easy to digest.
It's easy to digest, and it's very aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful. Verse 10 was, just as a living being attains a transcendently attractive form by rendering service to Lord Hari, similarly all the inhabitants of the land and the water assume beautiful forms by taking advantage of the newly fallen water. And 12 was, the mountains, although being struck by torrents of rain during the rainy season, are not shaken, just as those whose hearts are dedicated to the transcendental personality of Godhead are never disturbed, even when harassed by great misfortune. Yeah, there was a lot in there about we can't, we don't take the bhakti to avoid suffering. It's not actually part of the deal. but we can transcend it. We can actually become able to tolerate it. And this analogy of the mountain, like you point out, mountains are the biggest thing we can see. They're so rooted, they're so ancient, they don't move. They're like in the second canto of Bhagavatam, they're compared to like the skeletal structure of the Lord. They're like all-encompassing, big spinal things, and they're firm and fixed. And the fixity is through our dedication, our devotion and dedication, because the relationship we have with Krishna actually allows for complete fixity. Relationship with matter doesn't allow that. When we relate to matter, when our our fixed center is something with a physical body, or if it's like a subtle idea, also material, then those things, they're like clouds. Clouds, they stay for some time and then they go. So whether it's like a longer living cloud or a more wispy cloud, it's like basically the same kind of thing. So, but when the center is actually the Supreme Person, who is the source of all of us and of matter, then everything is actually completely reconciled, because that's a stable relationship. He's always there, and our relationship with him is always there. That's that devotion. That's the mountain. And so the example of the devotees, unmovable, yeah. The example of the devotees. In fact, many of our acharyas have described that, one of the main reasons why very advanced devotees go through intense things on this planet is for them, it's not like it's karma. For them, it's to help everyone else. Because all of us are here, like, spinning our wheels in the material energy, trying desperately to like figure out what's what, still thinking we're going to play this game and win it. And the devotees, because they're the pure devotees, the very advanced, like the eternal residents of Krishna's pastimes, they have no other center but him. So they show what it's like to be like pushed around by nature and time and consequence and losing and winning, but keeping Krishna in the middle. That's what they always do. And when you read about that, or if you see that, then you can actually learn, right? So they often don't have very prosaic, boring, event-free lives. They actually they go through difficult things, because they go through that as an example to all the rest of us. This is how you can be a mountain. Like Queen Kunti, and even Prabhupada, so many things.
I was also just thinking on another note, just of the yoga pose Tadasana, and what I learned in my
mountain
training,
pose.
but it's the foundation of every pose, like
Right.
that head to toe spinal alignment. When you think about it and you do other yoga poses, that is the foundation. So I don't know, that was just a little additional fun.
Great reflection. Thank you.
Thank you.
More reflections. Anything that stood out from last week? Reflections on our reflections. You can also reflect on what someone else shared in the WhatsApp if you thought it was inspiring.
I like the idea of like order. I just, I sometimes again lean more logical sometimes than heartfelt. And so for me, like having that order, and I love, I think back to when Prabhupada said, like, all you need is a cow and a little bit of land and, to survive. Like that's the natural order. You don't need, all the things and all the, all the extra. Like the natural order of things is to live simply. And so when we don't live according to order, that's where we find hardship, and that's where we find anxiety and stress. And so it's the idea of simplifying, which again, I'm not really there yet, but working on it. I think it's just so important. It's really cool to kind of say, okay, there's a natural order that Krishna has ordained. Nature reflects this. It's showing us like the perfect order of how things are. We're just choosing to abuse it, and how can we get more in equilibrium with what, nature's showing us.
Yeah, natural order. That's kind of like, in a nutshell, that's kind of like a lot of the reason why observing nature, being in nature is a mode of goodness activity, and it's conducive to spiritual life. Because if you're a little bit perceptive, you recognize that there is a natural order, right? There are cycles, there are seasons, there's instinct, there's interrelationship, there's connectedness, there's causality, and things work. They have their place. And so that leads into, well, there's order because there's a supreme intelligence, there's a supreme person. the world that we create for ourselves, there's order there too, because we're also ordered beings, but we have a lot of freedom as human beings, much more than like most other living entities, animals, plants. So we can create a lot of really funky, weird systems that aren't necessarily so working and logical. And there's a lot of inspiration in seeing that order. You know, when Prabhupada or spiritual scripture talks about the possibility of living really simply, it can be really radical actually for us, you know, living in the developed world, not just the developed world, like this age, which is following on the heels of, you know, several hundred years of trying as much as possible to rely on technology to solve our problems. And we're not like Luddites. We don't say technology is bad. Technology is like, and this is technology, right? But at the same time, recognizing that if tomorrow this webcam and the internet didn't work, that wouldn't stop us from going on. You know, it would stop a lot of other things. It wouldn't stop the basic things that we all need. You know, there's enough for our need, but not necessarily enough for our greed. We can sit around and chant Hare Krishna and read and discuss. We can live off the land. We can, you know, live simply, and then we're totally set up for that. In terms of how we're designed, and the world is designed, and everything else is kind of bonus on top of that. And there's kind of a bit of a leap of faith in that. It's like, really, can I do without my device? Or so. Thank you.
What was the word you used for someone who doesn't believe in technology?
Luddite.
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 That's
Somebody who's very much opposed to technology.
Huh. Kimberly had a great reflection she shared with me earlier.
Oh yeah.
I was thinking about, well, in the middle of yoga in the torrential downpour, really shouting at the top of her lungs, trying to instruct us. It was just like, so, it was like an analogy, almost a synonymous with everything that we read, that we have no control over anything, and that the controller is Krishna, is a higher source. And even if we looked at the weather, every day, you never know what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
And
it's a best guess.
we just have to be in it and trust and understand that it too shall pass. And then the sky opened up, and I mean, we were literally looking at lightning hitting the lake. Like you could look out and you could see just bolts of lightning hitting the lake. And I remember we started off in
Support and super diagnosis.
That's right. Yeah. And I just remember like laying there and being like, this is it. Thank you. Like just complete and utter surrender in that moment, because there was nothing else I could do. Other than close my eyes and hope to God there wasn't roof rain that would fall into my eyeballs, because that probably would have felt good.
Get what?
But just how amazing this book is. I mean, I pulled up this picture and it's like the first picture.
Lightning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have a hard copy that I can share with our online crew? Great. Okay. Any other reflections? Anything from our online crew before we go into verses 13 and 24? Okay.
Shamya, I did have a question, actually.
By all means.
So this might be something that maybe you answered, but I don't remember. I was just curious about the meaning of Bhagavata, because I hear the word vata in there, and then I'm familiar with that from Ayurveda, but I just wanted to, I was just thinking more, maybe that's not what I'm thinking, but.
Yeah, it's not the same thing. Vata on its own means like air. Bhagavata it's a name for the divine. Bhagavata means the divine, basically. You can break it down just like Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavata, Bhagavatam, they're all related words. Bhaga means opulence. Van means one who possesses. Bhagavan is basically means God or the Lord. It's a very neutral name. It's not like a personal name like Krishna or Rama. It means like the Lord, the possessor of all opulences. Bhagavan. Sometimes Bhagavan is used to describe very advanced devotees like Narada Muni. Because of their nearness to Krishna, they can also be sometimes called Bhagavan, but generally refers to God. And Bhagavad Gita refers to the song of God, the Lord's song. Light of the Bhagavata is basically light of the Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam means the divine Purana about the Supreme Person.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Verse 13. In the rainy season, some of the roads are not frequently used and become covered with long grasses, and thus it becomes very difficult to see the road. Similarly, in this age, the transcendental scriptures are not properly studied by the Brahmanas. Being covered by the effects of time, the scriptures are practically lost, and it becomes very difficult to understand or follow them. Here's a picture of what used to be a clear path, overgrown. So just like, yeah,
Pull it back a little bit.
just like when it rains, you get weeds. It covers up the path. So as the ages go, as time marches on, if spiritual knowledge is not preserved, if it's not carefully understood, if people don't take the time to study it and understand, not just like know it, but know why, be able to answer why, understand the principles that underlie it, then it becomes obscured, it becomes forgotten, it'll become changed. See, like, it's not enough to memorize something. You have to understand why it makes sense, right? Because the external world is always changing. Circumstances are always changing. If you say it has to be exactly like this, the way it is now, the way I can see it, well, those things are going to change. If you only if you understand the principles, can we reapply those same principles later? So there always has to be a class of people who take spiritual knowledge very seriously. So actually, all of us are doing that here. We're studying these books very scrutinizingly. We're trying to understand what is being described thousands of years ago, actually, in these books, how it's relevant today in every place in the world. It'll be relevant in the next millennium. It'll continue to be relevant because they're eternally true principles. And that's what makes a Brahmana. A Brahmana is somebody who studies Brahman. They study the supreme. They study the divine. And they dedicate themselves to that knowledge. They try to live by that knowledge. And they also try to distribute that knowledge. And so similarly, just like when you have a clear path, a road, if it's overrun by weeds, you don't know where you're going. Similarly, there's a way in which if you abandon spiritual knowledge for long enough, it becomes forgotten. Just like you can have, like you can go to Europe now, and there are the skeletal remains of like all the Roman roads around Europe because they built a huge road system. It was really important to them to transport goods and things all around Europe, and those things are there under the surface. And as soon as you clean up like the drift, soil and dust on top, you'll see like incredibly well created roads that you can still walk on now. Take like cars and horses and stuff. So you have to get that debris out of the way. We have to constantly refresh spiritual knowledge. That's why we're reading all the time. That's why we're studying all the time. Krishna says in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, I have shared this knowledge before to Vivaswan, to Ikshvaku. It's been passed down generation after generation. However, Arjuna, in the course of time, the science, although eternal, appears to be lost. So I'm refreshing it by sharing it with you again. So even something that's completely pure, like a diamond, can't be destroyed, but it can be covered. You can lose a diamond. You can lose something precious. So it's important to refresh our relationship with the divine through mantra. We chant Hare Krishna every day, and we orient ourselves with spiritual knowledge, these core texts every day, as often as we can. And doing that keeps us on the road, and it keeps the spiritual knowledge alive and relevant and bright. So it's not covered up, lost, or even worse, misunderstood, misapplied. Make sense?
Mhm.
So verse 14 is about relationships and stability in the world. The lightning becomes unsteady in its friendship, failing to remain faithfully in any one of the clouds, although they are the friends of the entire world. Just as lusty persons do not remain steady even in the company of their partners who possess excellent qualities. So this verse is talking about how if we don't actually, you can learn from nature. Like you could have this like spectacular light show of lightning in a thunderstorm, and it's very like dramatic, but it's very short-lived. So similarly, if we go after kind of short-lived gratification in life, we don't get stability. We don't get anything that lasts. And Prabhupada takes us to the level of, well, as he concludes his purport here, after all, in the material world, a man requires a woman and a woman requires a man, or we could say by extension, people need partners, generally. When they're combined, they should live peacefully in Krishna consciousness and should not be restless, like the lightning flashing from one group of clouds to another. So in other words, the purpose of connection and relationship, intimate partnership, is to create stability so that you can actually have a strong unit going forward. It's not to flash around from one exciting dramatic experience to another, like serial monogamy or just kind of like going after new experiences. That's very easy to do. It's actually kind of cheap to do. It's a mode of passion kind of thing. Higher than that is duty and stability and staying loyal. And higher than that is of course Krishna consciousness, where you're serving one another, seeing them as a spark of the divine, and supporting one another's material and spiritual growth. So there's a way in which just through nature and looking at thunderstorms, they can appear very scary and or dramatic, but they this come and go. They're not very. We've all experienced so many thunderstorms, and how many of them really stick out? They're just kind of like a flash in the pan, as it were. So better connections that are stable, that are lasting, that create some foundation to build on, move forward. 15. In the midst of the thunder and the cloudy sky, there appears a rainbow that has no string. In Sanskrit, the word for rainbow is Indra's bow. Indra's bow. It's like a bow, but without the string. You just have like the curved part.
What's the Sanskrit?
I don't, probably Indra Dhanu or something. That's just off the top of my head. That's what the words are, but I don't know if that's exactly what they say. But it's the bow of Indra. So he says, there appears a rainbow that has no string. Its appearance is compared to the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his servants in the midst of the material atmosphere. So rainbows are kind of miraculous, right? You have like this storm, you have stuff happen, and then you have like this splash of light in the sky. Rainbows are just kind of amazing. And so
That happened on Sunday too.
it happened on Sunday, right, after that storm and yoga during kirtan. So as Prabhupada says in the purport, by his inconceivable energy, the Supreme Lord can appear and disappear like a rainbow, which appears and disappears without being affected by the roaring thunder and the cloudy sky. Right? So like all these things can happen, but the rainbow is just kind of like shining above it, transcendental, like not really affected. So it's an analogy because Krishna's like that. He's not actually pushed around by all the drama of the world. And those who are dedicated to him, just like as we talked about in our preamble to the class, they're like mountains. They're not pushed around by the storms of the world. So they're also like rainbows. When we see Krishna, or when we see his pure devotee, we're actually experiencing like a rainbow. In fact, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, one of our great acharyas, he says, just like when you see the sun over the horizon, you don't see the whole sun first. What do you see? You see some rays, right? Before dawn, there's just like a few rays. You don't see the globe of the sun yet. And like the whole world is still basically dark, but you see some rays. Just like you see the rays before you see the whole sun, and that tells you you're going to see the sun. He says, when you see a devotee in your life, that's like the sun rising in your life. Krishna is going to come in pursuance of that devotee. When you see that devotee, it means Krishna is on the way, right? The appearance of devotees in our lives is like the sun rising. So Prabhupada is saying here what the Bhagavatam is saying. The rainbow is a transcendental experience, and as an analogy, right? It's just like this magical thing. But it's not just Krishna, it's also his devotees who carry his mercy with them. Because after all, like what are devotees doing? They're chanting. they're worshiping, they're offering food. You know, like we were studying on Fridays, Narada Muni's experience. He was a little boy. He met some devotees. What happened? They engaged him in service. He took some prasad. He became interested. He learned some mantras. His heart became interested in devotion. So that rainbow in the midst of whatever storms the material world is throwing at us, that's Krishna and his devotees and the whole bhakti culture, the bhakti process is appearing and giving us that lift, a transcendental lift. Any questions or comments so far? Just 3 verses in.
I love that. Devotees give us a transcendental lift.
Yeah.
And that's an indicator, like if we're not happy when we see a devotee, it's actually not about them. It's about, oh, take a look inside, like what is actually happening within me that.
Right. We're
You know,
misunderstanding
it
what
is.
we're actually seeing. We're seeing the
Right.
covering. We're stuck in the like the designations and all the material stuff.
Right.
But when you're associating with a devotee, you're associating with an extension of Krishna, right? Somebody who's actually deliberately trying to practice bhakti is rare and beautiful. And Bhagavatam in many places, like here, goes out of its way to point out that that's it's not a cheap thing. It's a special thing. Yeah, they're the servants of Krishna. Right. If you want to see the king, you got to talk to the servants. They'll get you in. Okay, verse 16. At night, by the grace of the moonlight, the clouds in the sky can be seen moving. Yet, the moon itself also appears to be moving, just as a living being appears to be moving because of false identification with matter. Right? If you see in the sky at night, the only source of light is the moon. When clouds go across it, you can see the clouds because the moon is itself luminous, right? So because of that, you can see the clouds. If it's like a dark moon night, no street lights, no artificial light, you can't see the clouds. You can see all this stuff passing by because the moon is putting off light. But because of that, sometimes as the clouds are passing, you can kind of feel like the moon is moving. It's not. The moon is stable, relative to the clouds. But we are in illusion. We see like, oh, the moon is just like the clouds. It's all just like moving. That's like our misunderstanding of our place in the universe and matter and spirit. Prabhupada talks about this.
Because really we're moving, not the moon.
What's that?
Because really we are moving.
We're moving?
The moon's not moving. Because, or does the moon?
Well,
The earth
when you
is
talk, it's not about the earth. It's
But I
about
mean, we are moving in space wherever we are. So it looks like the moon has moved to a different place, but really we have moved. You know what I mean?
it's not like that. It's like the clouds are flying across the sky and the moon is relatively stable.
Yeah.
But when you have them moving, when you have the clouds moving across the moon, you can sometimes think the moon is like moving in the opposite direction.
Oh, I
Right?
see.
It's an illusion. It's an optical illusion. Just like if you're in a stationary car and the car next to you starts moving,
Yeah.
you can feel like you're moving forward
Yeah.
because they're moving the other way.
Yeah.
You misidentify what's actually happening.
On a train.
Yeah. Right, or a boat. And so Prabhupada says, the moon is far away from the clouds and is fixed in its own orbit, but illusion presents a scene in which the moon appears to be moving. A living being should not float with a misconception of the temporary body. He must always know himself to be transcendental to the bodily identity. This is the path of knowledge, and complete knowledge fixes the living being in the orbit of spiritual activities. So identifying with matter is like an optical illusion. It's like seeing as if you're seeing the moon moving. Identifying with matter is like, I'm in this body, I am the body, this body is associated with its extensions, family, linguistic, cultural, ethnic, ideological groups and systems. I am those groups. I belong to those groups, right? Instead of seeing that there's a relationship of like, well, actually, I'm not the body. I'm observing the body. I'm dwelling within the body. Instead of understanding that we can identify with the body itself or its extensions and all the different ideas. And that's basically false ego. And it's kind of like an optical illusion. we don't see properly. And optical illusions can be very, very persistent, very convincing. And the illusion of material identification is very persistent. Without spiritual knowledge, it's very difficult to break that illusion, because it's not based on just like your eyeballs or like, you know, an optical illusion. It's based on your heart. We want to be little enjoyers. We want to be like little units separate from the divine. So we see universe, we see ourselves in it and everything shaped by that. We see colored by that lens of our own egoistic desire. So the real problem is not the seeing. The problem is the lens we put in front of it, you know? If you put a lens in front of your camera, you put like green colored lens, everything's going to be green. You're like, what is with this crazy world? It's all green. It's like, no, it's just a lens. All it takes is removing that lens and you can see everything properly. So similarly, the problem is with our own intention and our own lenses that we're putting in front of our own process of observing things. And so reorienting ourselves is a matter of knowledge, but it's not just surface level knowledge. It's about how we actually conceive of ourselves deeply and how we orient ourselves deeply, and letting go of those assumptions and falsehoods that underpin everything we do and everything we see. It's like, oh, but of course I am the body. So, or but of course I'm independent. So it's like those assumptions, just like in science, you have to examine your assumptions in an experiment. You have to know what all your assumptions are going in. Otherwise, you don't really know why your experiment is not working. You can't really pin it down.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about this actually. And not only just like the separating the soul from the body, and like not only for myself, it feels easier for myself actually, but to like, I'm gonna start crying. Because like I was growing up and there's this sense of like grief involved around that when your child is growing up. Yeah, moms know. And for me, I'm trying to lean into like seeing her soul rather than this attachment to this personal physical body.
Right.
That is who I've identified my daughter as. You know, my dog just turned 5 and my other dog died when she was 7. So it's like you like think about these things and you don't realize the level of attachment you have to the like the physical material form of other people, of other souls. And so like my question, I guess, is like, how can you advise somebody, help people like us who have these like pretty strong attachments that, you know, it's not the eternal souls and all of these beings are so beautiful. And it just hurts still so much when you really think about it from a material side. So like, how do you help people like me?
Yeah.
Who are struggling with that?
Well, how do you help people they know that the soul is different than the body and they get it, and still like there's so much attachment? Well, we're made for attachment. So that's the first thing. It's like we're not condemning attachment because that leads to impersonalism. We're made for attachment because our final goal is to become completely attached to Krishna. And so it's important to understand why we become attached to, you know, like our children. And so first of all, if nobody was attached to their children, nobody would last long enough to open up the Bhagavad Gita and chant Hare Krishna. We'd all just be like undernourished, emotionally mangled messes. There have to be people who take that sacrifice. It is a sacrifice. Being a parent's a sacrifice. It's a service you take to steward somebody, you know, through the shifts of their body and their emotional body and into adulthood and functioning, you know, humanhood. And so they can continue into the privilege that is like mature adult human life. including the opportunity to practice spiritual life. So that's why we become attached. And that's why there is like maternal and paternal instincts. There has to be. So that's Krishna's desire, because as you can see, like it's necessary for all of us need that. We need parents, and there's also a way in which we need children, because those of us who take on that service, they grow by giving in that way, right? And those that don't have to give in other ways so that they can actually grow in the ways that they need to, somehow or other anyway. So there's like this reciprocal relationship in which we're all moving towards Krishna by that. So it's like stepping backwards and seeing, you know, ultimately, like one thing that helped me is reflecting on, you know, if you look at the older generations, those who raised you, you know, your parents. I lost my mother a couple of years ago, and you know, like according to scripture, we don't have just one mother. We have the birth mother, and she's the primary mother, but there's also like basically any feminine energy. There is like the wife of the teacher and the wife of the leader, and the cow is a mother because she treats you like a child, gives her own milk, and the earth is a mother, and like all these things. So I was able to appreciate my mom, but also appreciate how that mom energy has manifested in my life in different places, right? So it's not just that my biological mother, who I love and I'm deeply grateful for, was like my mother full stop. That mother energy has been coming down. It came down through her, and it came down, and it's coming down through other people too. It's coming down through the earth. It's coming down through Tulsi. It's coming down through the cow and other people who occupy a motherly role. Like there's a divine essence to that, and some people can tap into it and serve in that way. And so when you're a mom or a dad or whatever, you are receiving that empowerment. It's not who you are. Just like I'm not the teacher here. I am functioning as a teacher, as a service, right? I'm just a devotee. I'm trying to be a devotee. Actually, that's true of all the mothers and fathers too. The difference is that when you're practicing devotional service, you can deliberately remember that. And it's just a very magnified example of that, because motherhood is super intense. You know, it takes a lot of attachment to make it work. So it's like, I mean, Prabhupada says, you know, the unconditional love that a mother has for their child is the closest thing that we have to an example of the relationship Krishna has for us and we have for him, because it is so causeless. It is like they can yell at you and throw a fit, and you're still like, yeah, but they're my kid. They can become a criminal and do all kinds of things, but you still see the good in them, right? That's what parents are capable of, and maybe even especially mothers. So it's not easy, but recognize that that's coming from above. The capacity to hold that space for somebody is coming from above, and do it as a service, and also understand that like it has its season, you know, and just like when you're letting go of anything, there is a kind of grief to it, you know. You talk to like a baseball player when they're retiring, like it's sad. There's a way in which I'm sure Mozart felt like when his capacity for composing symphonies was taken away from him. He was like sad, grief. But it, you know, so our roles as parents, they change. They change as our children age, and we may not want that, but that's because they change because there's a plan. It's not our plan. It's a better plan than our plan. Krishna has a plan for them. And when you understand that, then you can start to release the grip a little bit. Like, okay, what am I actually supposed to do in this time in my life and in my service? And what is like me just holding on to the way it used to be last week, last year, last decade, right? Maybe one day I won't be able to give class. And it's like, I'm not going to stop serving Krishna. And that the externals can change, but the service mode doesn't, right? So do what you can when you have it, be grateful for it, and understand the externals can change. But your service mode doesn't. Like we become parents to learn how to serve. That's the whole reason, because we're actually little servants, and being a parent is like a massive service role, biologically supported. It's like, okay,
They're on loan.
yeah,
Kids are on loan.
kids are on loan.
And they're not ours.
And they're not ours.
It is, so I feel like just on what Mel said, it's hard as a parent to reconcile because like you have this fierce protection and love as a mom and you think, well, I'm older, I could take care of everything, I do everything, but on the other hand, we're learning that we have to let go. So I've been finding it hard to reconcile, and I just think like what you just said, just being in this moment and loving them and being grateful for what I have in this moment with is all I can do.
Yeah.
Because I can't change it.
It's like any service. If you view it with attachment to the role and like, I'm the controller here, I have to it's got to be my way. You know, whether you're a temple president, a mom, a book distributor, monk, doesn't matter. If you have that grabby mode of passion energy, it's a problem. If you're like very like attentive to do your duty for Krishna's pleasure, whatever your duty may be, and you're also careful to see the signs, and you're taking wisdom and guidance from those who are more advanced than you in the same service and are devotees to see the signs of what does Krishna want from me in this service. Then whether you're a mom or a monk or a temple president or whatever, you'll do a great job, and you'll also like gracefully, you know, exit stage left when it's time for you to do that.
And it's also serving, to your point, without attachment, right? So it's like, and without being attached to the outcome.
Yeah.
So it's like, I gotta do my duty for Krishna and I'm gonna do the right things, but what the result of that is not a reflection, you know, on who I am.
Yeah.
Right? It's because we identify with that
Right.
that power, you know, or I identify with that control over a child, which happens quite a bit. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna keep this Krishna centered, but I gotta let go of what the outcome is because that is out of my control. I can only do what I can do. And that's, I think, the other hard thing with being a parent is like,
Big time.
you constantly are like, okay, I want them to be Krishna conscious and I want them to have this life, and they may not. And so it's dually hard to watch them grow and blossom, but also because it may not be what we expect them or want them to be. And it's like, okay, they're on loan. I look at myself in the mirror and say, okay, am I doing this with the right motives and in the right mode? And getting.
Yeah, if you look at it, it's actually an incredible arrangement to teach service and to teach detachment. You know, how could you convince a living entity who's so intent on being independent to learn service and detachment? Here's another living entity who's completely dependent on you, who you have this thing called love and attachment to. Through that, you will learn service and detachment. How about that? It's genius.
And it's also like holding both of these things of knowing, like having that spiritual perspective, that vision of, okay, this soul is on loan to me. I'm caring for this soul, right? And I understand that they're not their bodies and I have an attachment to it, all those pieces, and to honor the grieving process.
Yeah.
And to be like, oh, every time they are another year older, every time they lose a tooth, every time, you know, all the things they get their period, you know, like all of these things, it's like a celebration, and it can be a loss.
I mean,
and all of the little losses we have are endings and our practice for the ultimate ending when we leave our bodies.
Mhm.
So it's like to have that attachment to your child. It's like to practice really grieving, losing that which you love, because we're going to lose everything that we love in this material world other than our love for Krishna. Right. So like to not make yourself wrong for that, but to know, like you just said, we're meant to have attachment because we need to develop that deep attachment for Krishna. So not making it wrong to have attachment to your child, and to try to be able to zoom out when you can and be like, oh, I'm really caught in that, right? And now I need to go cry, and like, because my child just grew an inch and, you know, has a boyfriend now, right? It's like, so to do both, otherwise,
yeah.
You know,
It's not easy. It's not easy being a parent, especially a mom. It's just very difficult. I saw it with my mom. She was, I was a grown man. I was in my 30s. I, you know, had a master's degree. I was making money. I was like standing on my own 2 feet. She couldn't stop worrying. She knew it was silly. It wasn't in her head. She just couldn't stop.
That you became a monk.
No, before I was a monk.
Oh.
She just couldn't stop loving and worrying and being, there's no off switch. I learned that. Being a mom doesn't have an off switch. So this is why spiritual cultures also respect their elders, because like it takes a lot to do that, you know? So one thing that helped me is observing that from my parent. I've been really fortunate. My parents have been really good. They're really good parents. And so whatever I'm doing, it's like a reflection of them, and how much they've invested in me. But seeing like how hard it is to take care of somebody, it increased my appreciation for Krishna. Because it's like, look at how much gratitude I have to two people. Like, what do we have to owe to Krishna, who is unlimitedly patient, unlimitedly like tolerant, unlimitedly like 1 million steps ahead of all of our craziness, watching out for us, making sure we don't clamber over the edge in so many different ways. He is like the ultimate parent. Prabhupada says Krishna loves us with the love of 1 million mothers, right? Like, what is that? I want some of that. What am I wasting my time with anything else for when I could have the love of 1 million mothers? This is like a short form, 1 million is nothing. It's like, but it gives us an insight into what Krishna's causeless relationship of love is for us. So
I will say, like, understanding that illusory, like that last line in that chapter, it changed me as a parent, right? So like I became Krishna conscious right when my son was leaving the home. And I will say the impact, not only working with you, but also understanding who we really are and how that works and how that's in relation to the earthly relationships we have. Like, I kind of just was like, cool, he's good. And I'm like, he's gonna do his thing and Krishna's gonna watch him and Krishna's watching me and he's taking care of all of us and he's gonna do the things and I have no control over this and I can surrender that. And so it's different spot than when they're like in that nurturing phase. But I will say for me, it just like changed me. So probably the most dynamic way it changed me was with my relationship with him.
yeah, learning to like actually trust that Krishna is going to take care of them. Which is the entire thing the Shastra has been telling us. Like I said, that's detachment. Detachment means like letting go, letting God. Yeah. Great. Verse 17. Here's a peacock for you. Beautiful peacock. There's a way in which in India, during the monsoon season, when the clouds start to form and then the rainy season is about to start, the peacocks start dancing. So in pursuance of that, verse 17 says, when the clouds appear in the sky, the peacock begins to dance in ecstasy, as a sincere soul becomes overwhelmed with joy on the appearance of a saint at their house. They just see the clouds and by instinct they start dancing. Peacocks, strutting around with those feathers. And so there's a way in which like somebody who's pious in a heartfelt way, they understand the benefit of a devotee. They're grateful for the appearance of devotees in their lives. So you can't see, but we're making garlands here because we have a devotee coming to our community. And we're going to be hosting them, a very advanced devotee, and we're going to make garlands and offer to the Lord Chaitanya and then garland our devotee guests because we're grateful for the appearance of people who have no business other than serving Krishna when they come. That's whether they're monks or they're householders. If they're fully renounced in terms of their dedication to Krishna, then they're actually just the greatest wealth. And having them come to your doorstep, having them come into your zip code even is a big deal. Prabhupada says, it is the duty of the saints and sages to enlighten the fallen souls, and reciprocally, it is the duty of the householder to receive the saints and sages cordially, as the peacock dances in ecstasy at the presence of clouds in the sky. The fire of threefold miseries experienced by materialistic persons can be extinguished only by the cloud of mercy of the saints and sages, who can pour down the water of transcendental messages to put an end to the miseries of the householders. Okay. Verse 18. Many plants and creepers that were almost dead during the months of April and May, that's the dry season, are now visible again in various forms, for they are nourished by their roots in the moist earth. These numberless plants and creepers resemble persons who dry up in severe penances for some material gain, but then achieve their objectives and become luxuriously fat, nourished by sense enjoyment. There's a way in which we can see, like with the Olympics happening now, if you sacrifice your short-term happiness, you can have long-term happiness, even just materially. If you if you invest like $100 today in 30 years, because of the power of compound interest, you'll have, I don't know how much, but a lot. If you wake up early every morning and, I don't know, practice the violin, you can be incredible at it, actually. We have this capacity to give attention to things. And it's like performing austerities. And this idea of performing austerities can seem esoteric and not relatable, but actually it's completely relatable because we do it as soon as we start going to school. School is an austerity. Going and getting an education is an austerity. Getting any exercise, an austerity. Waking up even a minute earlier than your mind tells you want to, or your body, that's an austerity. Not overloading on sugar and like short-term sense gratification, that's an austerity. But doing these things gives you some currency to work with for the long term. You'll have more health, you'll have more wealth, you'll have more whatever, different things. And so just like the plants that were drying up, but their roots were down in the ground, they're like these fasting sages in the forest, you know, not drinking or eating. And then because of their austerities, they flourish and meet their material goals. So these plants, when the rain comes, they become luxurious and big. But Prabhupada is saying, understanding that that's how it can be, we shouldn't invest ourselves in the material things so much. Because that's just going to be, we talked about this last week too, that's just going to be coming and going like the dry and wet seasons. They come and go in cycles. A living being cannot snuff out desires, and to practice artificially erasing the actions of desire is more dangerous than the active desires themselves. All desire should be reformed and directed towards spiritual activities. Otherwise, those same desires will repeatedly manifest themselves in different varieties of material enjoyment, thus conditioning the living being perpetually in material bondage. Right? Sometimes people see like, oh, it's our desire that creates a problem, so we have to like snuff out desire. It's like, no, it's not possible. We have to orient. Bhakti means orienting your desires towards service, towards the Supreme. Then all that hard work, you know, now it's hard work chanting Hare Krishna, hard work making garlands for Krishna. We go grocery shopping, but we're now grocery shopping for our deities and offering meals to the deities and distributing the prasadam. It's still hard work. We're still sweating doing it. It's money and time, but it's all service. And it's completely different. The experience of it and the result of it. Difference between material austerity and spiritual service. Still several verses to go. Verse 19. A crane stands on the edge of a pond that is always disturbed by flowing water, mud, and stones. The crane is like a householder who is disturbed in the shelter of his home, but who, because of too much attachment, does not change their position. Cranes. Sometimes cranes, they live like in these next to these bodies of water, but there's like mud and stones and things are shifting, but the crane is stuck there. They're kind of like attached. So in life, it's natural to pick something and be stuck there. I remember when I was in grade 3, I was going to this one school, and I visited that school many years later. It was tiny. It was not a very clean or very nice school. It wasn't a particularly well-funded school, I got to tell you. But when I had the chance to move and go to a different school, because I took this test and they said, you can be part of the gifted program. We want to put you in this other school. I was like, Mom, I don't want to go. Because I was attached. I was attached to what I had. I didn't want to go to something else. Big fish, small pond. And so there's a way in which, you know, that can happen anywhere. It can happen with our homes. It can happen with our families. It can happen with our money. It's just like this grabbiness of like comfort and security. And I want this, and this is where I belong forever. Because we belong to Krishna forever. Eternality is our birthright. But if you invest that into some temporary thing, you're like the crane, you know, stubbornly, foolishly stuck at the edge of the water while it's like, you know, I mean, I don't have experience with cranes and water, but Prabhupada's saying here, like, the mud is coming, the stones are coming. It's really not the idyllic paradise they think it is, but they can't leave.
So is the piece about, like, because it's comfortable to say, even though you're like, this isn't a great place to be, but I know what it's like.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stay here.
That's the whole material world.
Mhm.
The whole material world is not a particularly comfortable place to be, but I know what it's like, and I want, you know. And maybe heaven, maybe hell, but it's my hell.
And we're not here for comfort, room for love.
Yeah.
But you forget.
Those who are too attached amidst the pinpricks of muddy householder life are compared to the cranes that stand on the bank of the river for some sense enjoyment despite all the inconveniences there. We should always remember that the society, friendship, and love we are supposed to enjoy in family life are only shadowy representations of the real society, friendship, and love reciprocated in the kingdom of God. There is no permanent reality in the conditioned life of material existence, but because of our ignorance, we are attached to the mirage. The idea of society, friendship, and love is not at all false, but the place where we search for it is false. We have to give up this false position and rise to the reality. That should be the aim of life, and that is the result of cultivating the human spirit, right? Life isn't just about being comfortable in this world and creating a nest. Humans can with difficulty create a nest in this world, which comes so naturally for an animal. That's not the goal of life, is creating a nest. As we've been talking at length in response to Mel's comment and the discussion around that, all this family life stuff is part of our own. It's there to help us grow. It's not for the sake of the nest. The nest is like a tool for every individual in it to grow towards Krishna more. So be wary of the tendency to kind of like root down in some material context and say like, this is it. This is me. I'm here forever. I want to stay here as long as I have this, and don't change anything else, Krishna. I just want this. It's like, that's a trap. That's actually a trap. Fierce torrents of rain break over the strands and partition walls of the rice paddy field. These disturbances resemble those created by the seasonal opponents of the standard principles of the Vedas, who are influenced by the age of Kali. So when the rainy season comes, you get floods. We know about this in Vermont. When the floods come, problem. Very problem. They say in India.
Very problem.
And so similarly, there's always opposition to spiritual messages. There's like, we talked about the weeds that grow that choke out the path. So there can be like, just forgetting spiritual knowledge and it being covered up. But there's also some people who are actively opposed to the message of surrender to the divine. They're actively opposed to the idea of a divine, our relationship with the divine, for any number of reasons. Maybe they have a deep-seated aversion to Krishna because that's where they are as a soul. Maybe they're fed up with the ways that spirituality has been abused, and so they kind of like throw the baby out with the bathwater and so forth. But for whatever reason, you will have opponents. There are opponents to spiritual life, and we were quoting Achyuta Gopi. It's a profoundly brave thing to practice devotion. There are always going to be people and ideas in opposition to that in this world. Ideas of distraction at the least. What to speak of outright opposition of like, no God. So Prabhupada says, the attacks of distortion are offered by atheistic philosophers who are concerned only with eating, drinking, being merry, and enjoying. These atheists are all against the revealed scriptures because such persons are intimately attached to sense pleasures and gross materialism. There are also others who do not believe in the eternity of life. Some of them propose that life is ultimately to be annihilated and that only the material energy is conserved. Others are less concerned with physical laws but do not believe anything beyond their own experience. And still others equate spirit and matter and declare the distinction between them to be illusory. So there's all kinds of weird ideas, There is no spirit. Everything is the same. Spirit and matter are the same. There is no individual. Or we are matter, and therefore when this matter disintegrates, then we just blink into nothingness. There's all these different ideas. And they're like floods in the rainy season, They can cause damage. And so you have to have these partition fields, like in rice fields and stuff, to keep things ordered. And so this verse is reminding us about the inevitability of being challenged with even on the basic things of our path. And so just doing the work to be convinced, right? Doing the work to be convinced intellectually and to be around those who are also trying to practice the fundamental things that we we appreciate as devotees, and finding those commonalities wherever we go. I always feel grateful when I find people who are spiritual in this world, whether they know or care about Krishna. If they understand that there's something more than matter, that there's a spiritual source, I understand them to be devotees on some level. And that is a wonderful thing, because maybe they're not advanced devotees, maybe they are, but they're actively trying to connect to the divine, and that's beautiful. And so, because not everybody's going to be there. Sometimes people are going to be neutral, and sometimes some people, the minority, but they're there, are going to be like vehemently opposed. It just really bothers them. The idea of service to the divine is really gets under their skin. And there's a lot of other ideas about who we are and what we are, other than spiritual units of a supreme spiritual source person. '21. The wind carries the clouds to different parts of the globe, and the clouds distribute rain to the satisfaction of the people in general, just as rich kings and merchants distribute their accumulated wealth, inspired by religious priests. So leadership is meant to be guided. Leaders of people are meant to be guided by leaders of spirituality, like the kings, the presidents, the kshatriyas, the organizers, the managers of society are meant to be guided by spiritual inspiration. That's what allows for this kind of distribution of wealth, for example, because a spiritually wise person who is themselves unattached in the world, like a brahmana, they understand that there is a certain amount of wealth in the world, but it's not for one person. It's not for just a ruling class. It's meant to be distributed so that everybody can progress. This is speaking to principles, enlightened principles of leadership, right? When society is run by Vaishyas, persons whose mentality is accumulating wealth, and that's the top of the social class pyramid, then the perfection of human life is taken to mean making money and keeping money. But above Vaishyas are supposed to be Kshatriyas and Brahmanas ultimately are spiritually enlightened persons, and they're supposed to be the advisors of people in power. They're supposed to advise people to take care of their dependents, in every social unit, families, villages, and ultimately, countries, states, and so forth. Because those spiritually enlightened persons understand the opportunity for service that's there. And they're beyond, what makes them spiritually enlightened is that they're beyond trying to win that game of, accumulating wealth. That's what defines them as being spiritually advanced. They're not trying to play those games anymore. So they don't misuse the wealth. So Prabhupada's talking about wealth and distribution, and how that has to come from enlightened leadership. Leadership means being the best servant. A leader is one who's qualified to serve, right? That's what allows you to lead properly. It's not charisma. It's not winning the power struggle, like climbing over the necks of those who you defeated on your way to the top. It's actually like your qualification is your ability to serve. So leadership means being a servant leader. You lead, like we've been talking about parenthood. You're leading in that relationship. The parent is the leader. You can't view your child as your equal, otherwise you'll have problems. You have to be their leader, right? You have to lead them until they're old enough that you can relate as equals, But before that, you're the leader. But why you're leading to serve, not to stoke your ego, not to show off your kid, not to win points in the marketplace of, I don't know, my kid's a doctor or whatever, all those things. That's not service. That's ego. You're leading to serve this living entity. It is a very selfless activity. Kings, presidents, mayors, teachers, spiritual leaders, they're all supposed to be servants. And so when it comes to wealth and distribution of wealth, it's the same thing. It's like, it's not something for the person at the top to like, oh, because you won, you get to enjoy. It's like, no, because you're at the top, you have the responsibility to make sure that everybody is served, right? You are the most qualified servant. That's what makes you a leader. That's real culture. Not you're the most qualified taker. You have shown yourself to be the best at taking, therefore you're a leader. No, that's backwards. That's not a leader. That's a opposite. That's a child. A child just takes indiscriminately. A leader knows how to give and serve.
It goes back to that Ragnar quote of, are you looking to be God or serve God? And I think we can use that with like everything. We can use that as our parents. We can use
Right.
that as political people. We can use that as, being in work. It's like, if you just stop and be like, am I trying to be God or serve God? And like, gosh, that just kind of erases so much confusion, because we can, once you know it, you can kind of be like, okay, yeah, I'm trying to be God here. So,
Right.
yeah.
It is the duty of the intelligent person, the brahmanas, to selflessly inspire the richer people to sacrifice for this purpose. It is suggested herewith that the men of the intelligent class should not try themselves to become kshatriyas or vaishyas, nor should they engage themselves in the occupations of the various other classes. Rather, the brahmanas should simply guide them in spiritual cultivation, just as the wind carries the clouds to other places to pour water. The wind itself does not take up the responsibility for pouring water. So sometimes people ask, like, how do we change the world? You change the world first by changing yourself, and then you can inspire people, right? Here, look at like our spiritual teachers, like Radhanath Swami. Like, he's a monk. He doesn't have anything. He's not distributing wealth. He doesn't have any wealth. He owns like a couple of pieces of cloth, but his purity is such that the people he's inspired, there are people among them who have wealth. There are intelligent persons among them. There are this kind of person and this kind of resource and that kind of resource, and they're all inspired because of his dedication to Krishna. They give. And so it's like the wind. The wind doesn't distribute the rain. It pushes the cloud. The cloud drops the rain. You don't have to be rich. All you have to do is inspire somebody who is rich. Be spiritual. Just dedicate yourself to Krishna, and then inspire everybody around you as much as you can, as much as Krishna allows you to. And whatever resource they have, engage it in Krishna's service. That's all it is. Be like the wind pushing that rain cloud around, and let them be purified by that act of giving. The king is purified by serving their subjects. The parent is purified by serving their child. That service purifies them. The brahmana is the one who wisely engages them in service so that they can be purified. Okay. And verses 22, 23, and 24 are all about this little boy, Krishna. See if we can see that. There he is with his friends. After the complete rainy season, the forest of Vrindavan was full of dates, fruits like dates and blackberries ripening on the trees and bushes. Lord Sri Krishna, along with his elder brother Sri Baladeva, and other cowherd boys of the vicinity, entered the beautiful forest, accompanied by the cows, to display transcendental pastimes with his eternal friends. Srila Prabhupada writes, Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appeared at Vrindavan about 5,000 years ago, and the relics of his appearance at Vrindavan were lost from view. But Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the very same Lord Sri Krishna in the form of a great devotee, appeared at Navadvip in West Bengal and excavated the holy places of Lord Sri Krishna's transcendental pastimes. He instructed the 6 Goswamis to compose authorized literature on the culture of Vrindavan, and any serious student anxious to know about the Supreme Lord may take advantage of this invaluable literature and the guidance of authorized scholars, and thus know about the Lord of Vrindavan, Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. "23. The cows that follow the Lord within the forest move slowly because of their heavy, milk-laden udders. But when the Lord called them by their specific names, they at once became alert, and as they hastened toward him, their milk bags overflowed and poured milk on the ground because of affection for the Lord." Here you can see cows with full milk udders rushing to Krishna. There it is. He descends at Vrindavan, and we may know that the Lord descends with his personal staff of cows, cowherd boys, and cowherd maidens, all of whom are but spiritual expansions of the Lord himself for his own pleasures. Thus, when called by the Lord, the cows were overwhelmed by joyous affection, just as the mother's breast overflows with milk when the child cries for it. All of us living beings are differentiated expansions of the Lord, but our affection for the Lord is submerged within us, artificially covered by the material quality of ignorance. For spiritual realization, one has to purify the heart and know things in their true perspective. As soon as one does this, the flow of one's natural affection begins to glide toward the Lord. And with the progress of this flow, one becomes more and more self-realized in various relations with the Lord. Just like the cows were naturally running after him when they were told. Last verse for today. When the Lord entered the forest of Vrindavan, all the inhabitants of the forest, both animate and inanimate, were eager to receive him. He saw that the flowers of the forest, all fully blossoming, were weeping in ecstasy, honey flowing down their petals. The waterfalls on the hilly rocks were gladly flowing, and one could hear sweet sounds from the caves nearby. So Prabhupada in his purport talks about how just like when Krishna appeared in Vrindavan, the natural world, including inanimate matter, was transformed. All the flowers weren't just blooming; they were blooming in direct service to Krishna, who's right there. All those jivas, and the waterfalls were doing service for Krishna and his friends. The clouds were shading them from the hot sun, and so in this way, the scene became transformed in relationship to that supreme center. So just like for us, in our lives, we engage matter. We engage. Prabhupada says, an electrician knows how to take work from electricity. With the help of electricity, they can turn water into heat or cold. Similarly, Krishna can turn matter into spirit and spirit into matter by his inconceivable power. We're supposed to actually engage what's apparently material in Krishna's service, and it becomes transformed. We engage our own bodies. This is just a collection of molecules, and it becomes spiritualized. We engage the groceries we get. We engage this building we're in. It's a temple. We engage our voices. We engage money. We engage our time. We engage other people. And in this way, that which appears to be material becomes spiritual. Its real nature becomes revealed in relationship to Krishna. It's the privilege of human life. Animals can't do that. Animals can be led. Humans have to do a little leading. So we're all about, in bhakti culture, finding humans who are qualified to lead us, and then functioning under their guidance to lead within our own little spheres, whether it's a family, a village, community, with our friends, to help lead people and inspire them towards Krishna, and also to just like engage whatever energy around us, including the material. You can have a very simple, small house somewhere. It doesn't matter how big it is or small. I guarantee you, however modest it is, Srila Prabhupada lived in a more modest place, and you can engage your four walls and a floor and ceiling in Krishna service. You can engage your furniture. You can engage the cable guy. You don't need TV, just saying. But if you do get it, I'm sure you can find a way to engage that too. Invite people over and watch the Prabhupada, Hare Krishna movie. And in this way, spiritualize the apparently material energy. Just like Krishna spiritualized all of Vrindavan from an apparently, mundane village, became manifest as the spiritual world in relationship to him. Hare Krishna. Well, that was tasty. Any comments, questions, reflections? We'll have to kind of keep it short. It's almost 8 o'clock. Anything that stood out? Yes.
I just always appreciate hearing over and over again that the Lord is submerged within us, artificially covered. It's as an older person, sometimes it's harder to tap in that, but I just wonder what it would be like to grow up as a child and have all this knowledge imparted into you. So, just trying to peel off all the layers, but it came later in life, so it's, hard to tap into sometimes. So I just appreciate to continuously hear, like, it is in all of us, and
it's
I have
natural.
the power to find it and ability to find it.
It's like a bird, you know, you see them like in their nest, right? And there's a way in which like when they get to a certain age, the mother's like nudging them out like, I know you got this.
Get out of
Does the little bird hatchling know that? No, they don't know. They don't know. But as soon as they're ready and they get booted out of that nest, they got wings. They're made for it. They're made for it. Even if they didn't know it. We're made for a relationship with Krishna. Everything else that we think we're about, we've learned along the way. We can unlearn, we can modify better, we can engage in Krishna's service. If it's really useless, we can set it aside. But what we're actually made for is connection with Krishna. We're made for it through and through. Like a bird can fly. It's part of the deal. Any more comments, questions, reflections?
Noel says, Hare Krishna, I have to go now, but thank you for this nectar. I will see you all in the WhatsApp chat.
Bye.
And Aaron, do you want to use your voice to say that? Okay, Aaron said, thank you to Melanie for the question. And then in Aaron's quote, right, of being a mother doesn't have an off switch.
Yeah. Doesn't have an off switch. Be grateful to your moms. Be grateful to the Supreme Mother, Radharani. She's manifesting this whole world so we can play out our material desires and hopefully one day turn to Krishna. How's that for a mom? How's that for patience?
And watching them struggle and watching them fail. And
Yeah.
it's hard to do that as a mother. So for her to see it from millions and millions of people for millions of lifetimes, it's got to be heartbreaking to her.
Yeah. And then how much great gratitude there must be when we start to try to practice Krishna Bhakti. So for this week, reflect on verses 13 to 24. Anything you find there. Could be a picture, could be the verse, could be a purport, could be something I said, could be something we shared, and reflect on it in WhatsApp. And we'd love to hear it. All right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Light of the Bhagavat ki jai. Burlington Bhakti Sangha and beyond ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Go to Premanande. Thanks, everyone.